She left the house the way she always did. No note, no fear, no reason to believe this day would be different. It was the morning of a familiar routine. A young woman set out on her bicycle along a quiet stretch of Highway 47 in New Mexico, a road she had ridden countless times before. The air was clear, the traffic light, the moment unremarkable. She told her mother she would be back soon. She never returned. At first, it felt like a delay, maybe a flat tire, maybe a longer ride than planned. Minutes passed, then hours. Concern replaced patience. When the search began, it revealed something no one expected. Her bicycle was found damaged along the roadside. She was not with it. There was no crash report, no emergency call, no witness who could say what happened in those missing moments. The road offered no explanation, only distance and silence. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. The questions outlasted the urgency. Then, nearly a year later, far from New Mexico, a photograph appeared in a Florida parking lot. It showed a bound teenage girl and a younger boy inside a van. The image was disturbing. The resemblance was unsettling. The connection was never confirmed. What remains is a disappearance frozen in time. Did it end on that empty road? Or did it continue somewhere no one thought to search? It lingers. She was known for her routines. The same roads, the same times, the same steady rhythm to her days. She had recently finished high school and was living at home, saving money, preparing for college. Her future was practical and planned. Friends and family described her as independent but cautious, someone who valued structure and followed rules. She wasn't impulsive. She didn't disappear without explanation. If she said she would be back, she was. That is what made the morning feel so ordinary. It was late September in central New Mexico. The weather was clear, warm but not oppressive. There was nothing in the air that hinted at danger. She set out on her bicycle along Highway 47, a rural stretch of road she knew well. Flat terrain, open land, sparse traffic. She had ridden that route many times before, often alone. Before leaving, she spoke briefly with her mother. She mentioned the time she expected to return, not because she felt unsafe, but because she planned ahead. Hours passed. The expected return never came. Concern replaced routine. Family members drove along the route she usually took, scanning the roadside, calling her name, checking ditches and shoulders. There was no sign of her until they saw the bicycle. It was found damaged along the side of the road. The wheel was bent. The position didn't suggest it had simply fallen over. It looked as though it had been struck. But there was no vehicle at the scene, no driver, no person nearby, and no sign of her. There was no blood in the area, no personal items scattered along the road, no clear direction of where she might have gone. The absence was complete. Law enforcement arrived and began canvassing the area. Neighbors were questioned. Drivers who had traveled the route that morning were asked if they had seen anything unusual. Some recalled the pickup truck in the area earlier that day. Others reported nothing out of the ordinary. No account could be confirmed. No timeline could be narrowed with certainty. The road offered no answers. What investigators could say was limited. There was no emergency call, no confirmed witness to an accident, no indication she had left willingly. Everything about her life pointed to the opposite. The last confirmed moment was simple and unremarkable. A young woman riding her bicycle down a familiar road, expecting to return home. She rode away, and the routine that defines her life ended there. At first, there was urgency. Within hours of her disappearance, search teams were organized and the surrounding area was combed on foot, by vehicle, and from the air. Law enforcement treated the case as serious from the beginning. This was not a teenager who had walked away from home. There were no signs of distress in her personal life, no arguments that morning, no belongings taken with her beyond what she needed for a short bike ride. Early attention focused on the road. Investigators considered the possibility of a traffic accident. The damage to the bicycle suggested impact. Perhaps a vehicle had struck her. Perhaps the driver panicked and left the scene. Perhaps what began as an accident turned into something else in a matter of minutes. But the evidence refused to cooperate. There was no body found along the route, no debris trail that clearly pointed to a collision, no vehicle reported with matching damage. Hospitals reported no unidentified patients. Repair shops reported nothing unusual. Every practical avenue was checked, and each one closed without answers. Tips began to arrive. Some callers claimed they had seen a pickup truck in the area that morning. Others mentioned a different vehicle entirely. A few reported seeing a young woman riding alone, but could not place the time with certainty. Each tip was followed, documented, and weighed. None could be confirmed well enough to establish a reliable timeline. The investigation settled into an uneasy middle ground between accident and abduction, between known facts and unanswered questions. Months passed. Then, in June of the following year, a development emerged far from New Mexico. A Polaroid photograph was found in the parking lot of a convenience store in Port St. Joe, Florida. It appeared to have been discarded carelessly, left behind among shopping carts. The image showed two young people inside what looked like a van. A teenage girl and a younger boy lay on a mattress. Their hands were bound with tape. Their mouths were covered. The girl stared directly into the camera. The boy faced away. The photograph was immediately unsettling. When it reached investigators, comparisons began. The girl bore a resemblance that was difficult to dismiss. Similar facial structure, hair color, and build. A distinctive mark on her leg appeared to match a scar known to belong to the missing woman. Experts were consulted. Analysts examined facial features and proportions. Some believed the similarities were compelling. Others cautioned that the image quality and angle made identification unreliable. No conclusion could be reached. The boy in the photograph was never identified. Missing children databases offered no definitive match. No missing persons report conclusively aligned with his appearance. The photographer was never found. No fingerprints were recovered from the image. No store surveillance captured who left it behind. No explanation emerged for how or why the photograph ended up there. What the photograph represented remained unclear. Was it evidence connected to the disappearance? Was it a separate crime, unrelated but equally unresolved? Or was it something else entirely? For the first time since the search began, the case extended beyond state lines. Hope rose again, not because answers were close, but because the silence had been interrupted. That hope did not last. No follow-up evidence surfaced. No second photograph appeared. No suspect was identified. The investigation reached another standstill. And once more, the leads stopped. Time became the enemy. As weeks stretched into months, the urgency that once surrounded the search slowly softened. Press conferences became less frequent. Headlines gave way to newer stories. Investigators were reassigned. The disappearance, once treated as immediate and pressing, began to settle into the quieter category reserved for cases without movement. For the family, waiting became a way of life. Birthdays passed without celebration. Holidays arrived with empty chairs and unanswered questions. A bedroom remained largely untouched, preserved as it had been left, holding the quiet hope that it might one day be needed again. Each passing year marked not progress, but distance from the moment she vanished. Investigators continued their work, though the passage of time made it harder. Old tips were reviewed again and again. Leads that once felt promising no longer held clarity. Witnesses struggled to recall details with confidence. Some had moved away, others could no longer be located. What memories remained were often fragmented, shaped by time rather than certainty. Physical evidence offered little help. The bicycle had already yielded everything it could. There was nothing new to test, nothing new to analyze. Without a body, without a confirmed crime scene, the case remained suspended between possibilities. The Polaroid photograph refused to disappear. It resurfaced periodically, mentioned in interviews, documentaries, and renewed appeals for information. Some officials maintained that it was unrelated, a disturbing image with no proven connection to the disappearance. Others acknowledged quietly that the resemblance and circumstances made it difficult to dismiss entirely. Yet without confirmation, the photograph remained exactly where it had always been, outside the boundaries of proof. No additional photographs emerged, no suspect was identified, no explanation surfaced. Over time, public attention waned, tips became infrequent. Each new year reduces the likelihood of fresh information. The investigation remained open but inactive, waiting for something, anything that might restart it. Behind the scenes, the uncertainty persisted. There were no arrests, no charges, no official resolution. Statements from law enforcement acknowledged belief, not certainty. Theories existed, but none crossed the threshold into action. What could not be proven could not be pursued. Time did not provide clarity. It worked in the opposite direction. Details faded, evidence weakened, possibilities narrowed not through answers but through exhaustion. The absence of resolution became permanent, shaping the lives of those left behind. The case did not end, it simply stopped moving. Several theories continue to circulate, none proven and none dismissed completely. Over the years, investigators, journalists, and the public have returned to the same limited set of possibilities, each shaped by what is missing as much as by what is known. One theory centers on an accidental collision. Some investigators have stated publicly that they believe she may have been struck by a vehicle while riding along the highway. The damage to the bicycle supports the idea of impact. In this scenario, panic becomes the turning point. The driver does not report the accident. A decision is made in minutes that cannot be undone. Yet, no vehicle was ever identified, no physical evidence surfaced, and no confession emerged. Without a body or forensic proof, the theory remains untested. Another line of thinking focuses on the Polaroid photograph. The image, found nearly a year later in Florida, introduced the possibility that her disappearance did not end on the roadside. The photograph's existence raises questions that have never been resolved. How did it travel so far from New Mexico? Why was it left in a public place? And why has no one ever come forward to explain it? Some investigators have suggested the photo may be unrelated, pointing out that Polaroids were common at the time, and that resemblance alone cannot establish identity. Others argue that specific details, including physical similarities noted by family members and analysts, make coincidence difficult to accept. No definitive conclusion has been reached, leaving the photograph suspended between relevance and doubt. There is also the possibility of a chance encounter. Highway 47 was lightly traveled but not empty. A passing driver, a brief interaction, an opportunity created by isolation. This theory explains the lack of witnesses and the absence of early evidence. It also offers no clear path forward, relying entirely on an unknown individual who left no trace. Contradictions run through every explanation. If it was an accident, why was there no evidence left behind? If it was an abduction, why was there no struggle visible at the scene? If the photograph is connected, why has nothing else ever surfaced to support it? Each question leads to another. Time has only expanded the range of possibilities. Witnesses age, memories shift, evidence that might have mattered no longer exists. Statements made years later cannot be tested against scenes that are gone. And then there's the hardest truth of all. In the absence of answers, uncertainty becomes permanent. The case does not settle into a single narrative. It remains open to interpretation, shaped by fragments and silence. Not knowing allows every possibility to exist. For investigators, this uncertainty has practical consequences. Without a confirmed crime, jurisdictional limits complicate cooperation. Leads that cross state lines depend on evidence that no longer exists. Advances in forensic science offer little without material to test. Periodic reviews have been conducted, but each returns to the same impasse. The file grows thicker while answers remain thin. Public belief shifts over time, influenced by documentaries, articles, and renewed attention. Yet belief is not proof. What endures is a collection of questions tied to a single morning and an ordinary decision to ride a bicycle. Until something new emerges, the case remains defined not by what is known, but by what cannot be recovered. It waits, unchanged, for a detail overlooked, a memory unlocked, or a witness willing to speak. Until then, the space between evidence and explanation remains, holding the disappearance in place, unresolved, suspended in the gap between certainty and silence. That space continues to define the case today for investigators everywhere. For families, uncertainty is not neutral. It does not remain confined to a case file or a line in a report. It settles into daily life, shaping routines, decisions, and memories. Without answers, there is no clear point where grief begins or ends. Instead, it lingers, unresolved, carried quietly through years that continue without explanation. The absence of answers became a life sentence, not for one person, but for everyone left behind. There was no body to bury, no official conclusion to accept, no moment that allowed the family to move from waiting to mourning. Each day existed in between, suspended by the possibility that something might still change. Hope did not disappear, but it became heavier with time, burdened by the knowledge that it might never be fulfilled. Simple moments carried weight. Birthdays were reminders of age unmarked. Holidays arrived with traditions altered by absence. Questions that once felt temporary hardened into permanence. Every phone call brought a brief pause. Every knock at the door carried a moment of expectation. For the community, the disappearance became part of its collective memory. People remembered where they were when the news spread. They remembered the search, the roadside, the bicycle. Over time, those memories softened at the edges, but they never fully disappeared. The case remained a quiet reference point, a reminder that familiarity does not guarantee safety. Law enforcement acknowledged the human cost of unresolved cases. Without resolution, families are left without direction. Counseling cannot replace certainty. Time does not offer closure. It only increases the distance from answers that once felt closer. The Polaroid photograph, the theories, the speculation, all existed outside the family's control. Public attention surged then faded, but the private impact remained constant. Each retelling of the story reopened questions that had never been answered the first time. What remains most difficult is the lack of finality. There is no definitive ending to mark the past as complete, no confirmation to settle memory into history. The story does not close. It waits. And in that waiting, uncertainty becomes its own form of punishment. It follows the family through ordinary days and extraordinary moments alike, reminding them that something was taken without explanation and never returned. The passage of time does not lessen that absence. It reshapes it, spreading it across decades, binding it to every unanswered question. This is the lasting weight of not knowing, carried quietly, endured continuously, and felt long after attention has moved on. She left the house expecting to return. That is the detail that never changes, no matter how many years pass. A routine morning, a familiar road, a plan to come back home. Everything that followed unfolded without warning, without witnesses, and without answers. Decades later, that stretch of highway still exists. Cars pass over it every day, unaware of what it represents. The photograph still resurfaces from time to time, studied and debated, offering no confirmation and no relief. The questions remain, untouched by time. This story endures not because of spectacle, but because of absence. Someone vanished in broad daylight, and the truth never caught up. Investigators have revisited the case. Theories have been proposed, examined, and set aside. Belief has never become proof. What remains is a space where answers should be, a space shaped by uncertainty and silence. So the questions return, as they always do. What detail was overlooked? What moment mattered more than anyone realized? Could something still exist that has not yet been recognized for what it is? And beyond this case, how many other stories like it remain unresolved, waiting quietly for attention? If this story stayed with you, take a moment to reflect on it. Share your thoughts, not to assign blame, but to keep the memory alive. Sometimes discussion is not about solving a case, but about refusing to let it fade. If you value stories told with care, accuracy, and respect for those left behind, subscribe for more. These cases deserve to be remembered, examined thoughtfully, and carried forward, not for answers alone, but for the people at the center of them.